Rain had a way of swallowing sound in Seattle. It softened the city without truly soothing it, and turned every surface into a reflection of something people wished they were not. On that night, the shelter at 4th Avenue closed early because of a blown transformer, leaving a handful of people outside in the cold with nowhere to go. Lena Brooks stood among them with her thin backpack pressed tightly against her shoulder blades. The zipper had broken weeks ago, and she held it together with a safety pin, a small reminder that nothing about her life stayed together unless she forced it to. She did not complain. Instead, she knelt beside a little boy who had lost sight of his mother in the confusion and guided him toward the corner until the frantic woman arrived with tears and gratitude. Then the boy and his mother disappeared into the dark as if they had never been there at all. The rain grew heavier. It pooled at the edges of the sidewalk and spilled into the street like a warning. When the street lamps flickered, it left Lena alone with her breath fogging the air around her and the sound of tires splashing through puddles. She pulled her thin jacket together and headed toward the bus stop where the roof barely held. She stood beneath it shivering, trying to pretend her teeth were not chattering. She would not beg. She had never begged. Not during the layoffs that shut down her cafe job, not during the months she bounced between shelters, not when strangers looked at her as if she were invisible, or worse, dangerous. A few blocks away, Adrian Hale stepped out of the Hale Tech building with a single purpose: survive the night. Cameras waited outside the lobby hoping to capture the perfect scandalous angle for the story that had been circling for days. CEO fails community. CEO protects profits while shelters fail. Lies built carefully by his own CFO, who had spent months preparing the sabotage. Adrian ignored the flashing lights and ducked into the back of a car where his assistant Nina waited. He told her to drive anywhere that was not home and not the penthouse where reporters now camped like hunters. He needed time to think. They drove until the streets emptied and the high-rises thinned into modest blocks. That was where Adrian saw Lena for the first time. A lone woman under the bus stop roof hugging herself as the rain beat down relentlessly. Something about the way she stood tall despite the tremor in her body made him tap the window and tell Nina to stop. He stepped out into the rain without an umbrella, ignoring Nina's worried protest. As he approached, Lena did not shrink away. She lifted her chin as if to make herself appear bigger than she felt. "Sir, you should not stand out here." "You will get soaked," she said, her voice tiny but steady. "And you should be somewhere warm," he answered gently. "I will be fine," she whispered, though her hands betrayed her. He reached into his jacket, took out a folded bill, and offered it without arrogance or pity. She shook her head firmly. "I do not take money from strangers." Adrian lowered his hand. He did not insist. That startled her more than the offer had. Most people either looked through her or pushed money at her to ease their guilt. He simply stood there present, without demanding anything in return. They stayed like that for a moment as the rain drummed above them, an odd, silent truce between two people who had no reason to acknowledge each other. Nina called through the open car door. "Adrian, the board needs your answer by morning. If you do not appear with a fiancé next week, they might go public." Lena blinked. She looked from Nina to Adrian, noticing the expensive car, the tailored suit, the weight he carried in his posture. "You are someone important," she murmured. He did not deny it. Not tonight. A sudden gust of wind hit the bus stop, making the thin metal roof groan. Lena stumbled, and Adrian caught her elbow lightly, steadying her before letting go immediately. "Reporters are coming this way," he said quietly. "They follow me everywhere lately. If they see you here, they will assume you are tied to my scandal. Let me take you somewhere safe." She hesitated. Not because she feared him, but because she feared stepping into any world that was not hers. Safety was never free. Nina pulled the car closer, splashing water onto the curb, and for a brief second the headlights illuminated them so brightly that an onlooker across the street snapped a photo. It looked intimate, even though it wasn't. That made Lena flinch. She allowed Adrian to guide her into the car only because the alternative was standing alone in the storm as strangers misread her existence. The moment the door closed, silence wrapped around them. She still shook from the cold, trying to make sense of how her night had shifted so abruptly. Adrian watched her carefully, making sure not to invade her space. "I will take you to an emergency unit we use for staff," he said calmly. "It is not luxurious, just warm and empty. No obligation attached." His voice was gentle, but his world was too large, too sharp for someone like her. She pressed her hands together to steady her breath. The wipers brushed away sheets of rain as the city blurred beyond the glass, and she felt smaller than ever inside a car designed for someone of power, not someone who slept wherever the night allowed. After a long moment, she whispered so quietly she was not sure he would hear. "If I accept your help, do we have to sleep together?" Her voice cracked at the end, betraying fear she had hidden for too long. The question hovered between them, jagged and fragile. Adrian inhaled slowly and looked straight ahead. He did not answer. His silence was not avoidance, but a moral struggle, a boundary he refused to cross without certainty she was safe. The car kept moving through the rain as her question echoed louder than any storm outside. The rain had thinned to a cold drizzle by the time Adrian guided Lena into the quiet building tucked behind an alley near Capitol Hill. It was not a penthouse and not the kind of place anyone would associate with a billionaire. It was a modest emergency apartment Hailtech kept for employees who worked overnight or needed temporary refuge during crises. The hallway hummed faintly with the sound of old fluorescent lights, and the carpet smelled faintly of detergent. Lena hesitated at the threshold as if stepping inside might trigger something she could never undo. Adrian noticed. "You do not have to stay," he said quietly. "This is only shelter from the rain, nothing more." She clutched the strap of her backpack and looked around the small studio. A single bed, a kitchenette, a folded stack of employee blankets on the table. Nothing about it felt threatening, but nothing felt familiar either. "I do not want to be a burden," she murmured. "You are not." His tone was steady but soft, the kind of steadiness Lena had not received from anyone in years. She finally nodded and stepped inside. Adrian placed the key on the counter and stepped back as if granting her space was the only appropriate gesture he could offer. He handed her a small card with a phone number. "If anything feels unsafe, call Nina, not me. She is better at helping. You do not owe me anything." The way he said it made her chest ache with a feeling she did not want to name. He turned to leave, but Nina appeared at the doorway holding a tablet and a look Lena could not decode. "Adrian, we need to talk," she said. "The board meeting is in 10 hours, and they expect you to present a fiancé at the shareholder event in 2 weeks." Lena froze. Fiancé, a word that did not belong anywhere near her life. Adrian exhaled tiredly. "I am aware." Nina lowered her voice, though Lena still heard every word. "The media believes you are cold, out of touch, and too wealthy to understand real people. Someone like her," she gestured gently toward Lena, "could change that image." Lena felt heat rise in her cheeks. Someone like her. Homeless, jobless, invisible. Adrian shot Nina a warning look. "She is not a tool." "I know that," Nina replied. "But if the board forces you into a corporate engagement with someone in the industry, it could be worse for everyone." Lena hugged her arms around herself. She did not want to be discussed like a solution to a billionaire problem. She stepped closer. "I do not understand what any of this has to do with me." Adrian met her eyes. "Nothing, unless you want it to. I will not ask anything of you." It was Nina who spoke next, carefully choosing her words. "A short-term agreement. 3 months. Appear with him publicly at a few events so the board sees stability and the media softens. You will be compensated with housing and help finding a job. No physical expectations. No private pretending. Only what you choose." Lena shook her head quickly. "I am not selling myself." Adrian stepped in gently. "No one is asking you to. Think of it as a partnership, not a performance." It sounded too grounded, too respectful, almost unbelievable. She moved to the window, letting the cold glass cool her thoughts. The apartment building across the street glowed with warm orange lights where families lived normal lives. A world she had not touched in years. "I do not want to be used," she whispered. "Then you set the boundaries," Adrian replied. His voice did not waver. Lena turned back to him, studying the man whose life operated in skyscrapers and boardrooms, yet stood in this small apartment as if it were neutral ground. "Why me?" she asked quietly. Adrian hesitated before speaking. "Because you turned down money. Because you looked me in the eye without wanting anything. Because you helped a child tonight even when you had nowhere to go." These were not compliments. They were observations spoken with sincerity. Lena felt the room shift around her. Nina stepped out politely, leaving them in a silence that felt delicate. Adrian opened a folder he had carried in his coat. Inside was a short, simple contract. 3 months. Appear at 4 to 6 events. No physical contact unless initiated by her. Housing and job assistance included. Harold Watkins, attorney and compliance officer, would oversee terms to make sure Lena had full autonomy. He placed the folder on the counter, but did not push it toward her. "Read it or throw it away. Your life does not change unless you choose it." She stared at the papers but did not touch them. Adrian moved toward the door, ready to leave. As he reached for the handle, the building lights flickered. Lena startled despite herself. "Old wiring," he said gently. "Nothing to worry about." But she knew he saw the fear she tried to hide. She forced her voice steady. "The shelter will not reopen for a while. They said it could be weeks." Adrian waited but did not speak. She continued, "If I sign this contract, there is no bed sharing, no touching, and you will not pretend privately." "Correct." "You decide everything," Adrian answered. His shoulders softened as if the air around them calmed. Lena slowly approached the counter. She opened the folder, her fingers trembling as she traced the simple clauses. She read every line twice, then a third time. She was not agreeing to romance, not agreeing to a life she could not sustain, only protection and temporary stability, and he was agreeing to boundaries most powerful men ignored. Finally, she looked up. 3 months. Nothing more. Adrian nodded. 3 months. She signed with the pen resting beside the folder. He did not watch her sign. He kept his eyes respectfully away until she quietly set the pen down. When he finally looked at her, she stood straighter than before. Not because the contract changed her, but because the choice was hers. Adrian left the apartment without another word, allowing her the dignity of solitude. When he stepped into the hallway, Nina whispered, "Did she sign?" Adrian did not smile yet. Something in his expression softened. She did. Inside the apartment, Lena touched the counter where the contract rested and whispered to herself, "What have I done?" But for the first time in months, the question did not sound like regret. Morning arrived with a pale Seattle sun that barely pushed through the clouds drifting low over the city. Lena woke in the small emergency apartment with the strange sensation of being somewhere safe, yet temporary, as if the room itself reminded her not to grow attached. She sat up slowly, adjusting to the quiet. No snoring from rows of cots, no footsteps of people rushing to line up for breakfast, no shelter staff shouting instructions. The silence felt unreal. A knock echoed softly. When she opened the door, Nina stood there smiling kindly with a clipboard in hand and 2 paper cups of coffee that smelled far too expensive for anyone who spent nights in shelters. "Good morning, Lena. We have a busy day." Lena blinked. Busy. She had not had a busy day since before the cafe closed 2 years ago. Nina entered lightly scanning the apartment as if assessing what Lena might need without making her feel judged. "I brought coffee and a few basics. Also a schedule, but it is flexible. You can say no to anything." She placed a neat folder on the table and stepped back. "First, we will stop by hair and wardrobe to prepare you for tonight's community benefit event. It is small, only 200 people." Lena nearly dropped the coffee. 200. For what? Nina softened her voice. "They need to see you beside Adrian. It helps stabilize his public image, helps calm investors, but you only have to look presentable, not transformed. Just clean lines, neutral colors, nothing flashy. A stylist team appeared at the door almost magically, as if summoned by Nina's confidence. They carried garment bags and cases of makeup and hair tools. Lena's eyes widened. I do not need all that. Really. I can do my own hair. I always have. One of the stylists, a warm woman named Marcy, shook her head gently. We work for you, not at you, and we keep everything natural. Just a small refresh. You are already camera-ready. Lena wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it, but something about Marcy's warm tone made her relax a little. She let them guide her to the bathroom chair where they trimmed her hair, cleaned it, styled it with soft waves that felt too luxurious for someone who had washed her hair in sink basins weeks before. They chose a simple navy dress, elegant but modest, paired with a thin coat that looked tailored even though it was borrowed. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself, but she did not look fake. Just polished, like someone who belonged somewhere. She swallowed thickly. This is too much, too strange. Nina stepped forward gently. It is only surface level. Nothing changes who you are. That is why Adrian trusts you. Lena stiffened slightly. Trust. That word carried more weight than she wanted. Nina handed her a folder with event etiquette notes, casual and non-intimidating. Use whichever fork you feel comfortable. If someone asks about your background, answer honestly or politely decline. Do not let anyone make you feel small. That is the only rule. The words felt like armor she had never worn before. They left the apartment and stepped into a sleek black sedan Hailtech used for corporate transport. Lena sat in the back seat, unsure where her hands should go. Through the window, she watched Seattle pass by like a world she had been exiled from, slowly welcoming her again. When they reached the Hailtech Tower, its mirrored surface rose into the sky, reflecting clouds that moved faster than her thoughts. Employees in tailored suits hurried through revolving doors. None of them noticed her. She was invisible again, but in a different way. Nina guided her through a side entrance, avoiding the main lobby where cameras often lingered. Inside, everything felt cold metal and quiet ambition. Lena walked carefully, unsure if every footstep echoed. They reached a private elevator where a security guard scanned both their badges. The doors closed with a hush, and Lena breathed more shallowly than before. On the top floor, Adrian waited, reviewing documents at a standing desk. He looked sharp and distant until he glanced up and saw her. For a moment, something in his expression softened imperceptibly. You look comfortable, he said simply. Not glamorous, not transformed, comfortable. She nodded awkwardly. They chose something simple. I asked them to, Adrian replied before lowering his gaze. I did not want you to feel like a costume. His consideration made her shift her weight, unsure how to respond. He closed his laptop and walked toward her, maintaining a respectful distance. Tonight is easy. Shake hands, smile. Occasionally, stay near me, but not too close. If you ever feel overwhelmed, tell Nina and she will pull you aside. Lena appreciated the clarity. She appreciated even more that he explained without assuming she understood this world. They headed downstairs to the event hall. The subtle hum of wealthy conversations filtered through the walls, crisp laughter, clinking glasses, murmurs of strategy and social performance. Lena hesitated at the doorway, gripping her coat. I do not belong here, she whispered under her breath. Adrian heard her. Belonging is a construct of people who fear humility, he said quietly. You are not here to impress them. You are here because you made a choice. You walk beside me, not behind. The words settled deep in her chest. He offered his arm, not touching her, just presenting it. She nodded faintly, and they stepped into a world she had never asked for. The room fell into a curious hush as guests noticed Adrian's arrival with a woman no one recognized. Lena kept her chin steady, her posture soft but upright. Some smiled politely. Others assessed her with swift, calculating glances. Corporate wives whispered behind manicured hands. A politician's assistant stared too long. Lena felt heat rise up her neck, but Adrian's steady presence grounded her. During dinner, she reached for the wrong utensil and paused, frozen. Adrian casually picked up the same one, mirroring her choice so seamlessly that no one else noticed. Gratitude warmed her more than the soup. Across the table, Evelyn Ward watched everything with eyes sharp as glass. When dinner ended, Evelyn approached her with a smile that did not fully reach her eyes. "So you are the woman we have heard so much about." Lena inhaled carefully. "I am just someone helping for a short time." Evelyn studied her without blinking. "We will see." Adrian stepped beside Lena, subtly signaling support, yet not intruding. Evelyn's gaze shifted, acknowledging his allegiance with a hint of disapproval. As the evening closed, Lena's nerves settled into something steadier. She had survived. She had not broken, and Adrian had not let her drown in unfamiliar waters. When they left the event, she finally exhaled. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly. Adrian looked at her with quiet clarity. "Because you do not want anything from me. Because your dignity is intact even when the world tries to steal it." She felt her chest tighten. It was not a romantic line. It was the truth spoken plainly, and truths like that were rarer than money in his world. The morning after the benefit event arrived with a damp grayness that felt typical for Seattle but heavier somehow, as if the city itself held its breath before storms that were not weather at all. Lena woke early, slipping into her worn jeans and simple sweater before heading to the community kitchen where she volunteered whenever shelters needed extra hands. Despite the contract, despite the borrowed dress still hanging untouched in the apartment, she refused to let any version of luxury distract her from the life she still lived. The kitchen was crowded with steam rising from giant pots and volunteers moving quickly in organized chaos. Lena rolled up her sleeves and began washing trays, her fingers turning red from the cold water that never seemed warm enough. A few people whispered while sneaking glances at her. The news had circulated with alarming speed. A mystery woman beside a billionaire, a possible fiancé, a homeless girl elevated overnight. The whispers were not cruel, but curious, edged with skepticism. Lena kept her eyes down, focusing on the rhythm of rinsing and stacking. Near noon, a subtle change in the room's energy made her pause. The volunteers straightened unconsciously, and a few fell silent. Lena turned and saw Adrian standing in the doorway, his presence impossibly out of place among metal trays, industrial stoves, and plastic aprons. He wore no suit jacket today, only a dark sweater and simple coat, but something about his posture still carried the quiet gravity of someone accustomed to being watched even when he wished not to be. "You should not be here," she whispered, almost scolding. "Paparazzi will find you." Adrian walked in anyway, ignoring the subtle stares. "Nina said you were working here and I was in the area." "You were not in the area," she murmured under her breath. He pretended not to hear. He approached as she scrubbed a tray and noticed her hands turning raw. Without speaking, he pulled a small package from his coat. Thermal gloves. He held them out, keeping a respectful distance. Her expression tightened. Someone else probably needs them more. Adrian looked at the gloves, then at her painfully raw hands. That was not the point. But if she believed someone else needed them, he would not argue. He lowered the gloves and simply placed them in the donation bin. Her breath caught. She had not expected him to respect her refusal this much. Most people insisted. He never did. "Why did you really come?" she asked quietly. Adrian studied her for a moment. "Yesterday was difficult. I wanted to see if you were all right." That was all he said, but Lena felt something click inside her chest like a window opening for the first time in years. She went back to washing dishes, trying to recover from the unexpected warmth in his tone. Adrian remained nearby, assisting with nothing but making sure she was not alone. He moved to the far corner, pulling on an apron, and began organizing canned goods with the focus of someone who did not know how to stand idle in any room. People whispered, but no one approached. Adrian created a bubble of calm simply by being present. When the lunch shift ended, Lena stepped outside into the chilly air, rubbing her hands together. Adrian followed, leaving several steps of space. She sat on a curb, drinking a small cup of soup. The cup steamed in the cold air. Adrian lowered himself onto the step beside her, keeping a gap, but not a chasm. He accepted a paper cup she handed him and tasted the soup without complaint, even though it was bland. Lena looked at him sideways. "Why are you not with your investors, or your board, or your mother?" she asked. Adrian lifted the cup as if studying the steam. "None of them needed me right now." His voice was quieter. She frowned. "And I do." "You misunderstand," he said gently. "I came because I wanted to see what your world looks like. You came to watch me wash dishes. I came to see how you survive storms without ever asking for shelter," he answered. She did not know what to do with that. They sat in silence for several minutes, the soft hum of traffic behind them, the distant clatter of pans from the kitchen echoing faintly. For the first time since signing the contract, Lena felt something shift. He was not treating her like a tool. He was studying her with the same focus he used on complex equations and corporate crises, not to evaluate, but to understand. She wrapped her arms around herself. "When the pandemic hit, I lost everything," she said quietly. "The cafe shut down. Rent went up. I kept looking for work, but everyone said, 'Come back when things settle down.' Things never settled down." Adrian listened without interrupting. "My mom got sick a few years before that," she continued, "and I took extra shifts because we did not have insurance that covered what she needed. After she passed, I sold what little we had left. I thought I would get back on my feet, but the world kept moving faster than me. It took everything not to break." Adrian's voice came slowly. "My father died when I was 23. Evelyn took me in, but I had to earn my place every day. I learned quickly that wealth does not guarantee family. Sometimes it guarantees the opposite." Their eyes met briefly. It was not romantic, it was recognition. A fragile thread between two lives shaped by loss, albeit in different forms. Lunchtime rush ended, and Lena returned her cup. Adrian stood watching as she gathered her backpack. She looked stronger in that moment than any board member or investor he had ever admired. She had no armor except her dignity, yet she seemed unshakable. As they walked toward the street, a journalist recognized Adrian snapping a quick photo from across the road. Lena flinched, but Adrian stepped instinctively to shield her without touching her. No words needed. They moved on. Hours later, Lena returned to the emergency apartment while Adrian headed back to Hailtech for another brutal round of investor calls. Yet, something stayed with him. The image of Lena sitting on the curb sipping soup with quiet resilience. That image cracked a wall he had built long before the scandal, long before the contract, long before the board demanded a fiancé. It was the first crack, but not the last. The storm that hit Seattle that evening was not made of rain, but headlines. By sunset, Lena had finished her volunteer shift and walked back toward the emergency apartment unaware that the city had begun whispering her name. Cole Maddox had finally executed the next step of his quiet sabotage, releasing a carefully crafted leak to a handful of aggressive digital tabloids. It began with a single photo taken days earlier, the moment Adrian had helped Lena into his car outside the bus stop. Cole's team had blurred the rainy background, sharpened the lighting, and tightened the crop until it looked intimate, far more intimate than reality. Then they attached a headline designed to burn through the internet like gasoline. Billionaire CEO found leaving shelter with mystery homeless girlfriend. The story spread with dizzying speed. Influencer gossip accounts reposted it within minutes, adding comments questioning Adrian's intentions and speculating about Lena's past. Every retweet carved another chisel mark into the fragile privacy she barely had left. By the time Lena reached the apartment, her phone, the cheap prepaid one she barely used, was lighting up with unknown numbers. She frowned, confused. She rarely received calls at all. Then someone knocked on the lobby door downstairs, a loud, persistent banging that made her freeze. She peeked from the window and saw two people holding cameras loudly asking if the billionaire's charity romance was real. Her stomach dropped. She locked the apartment door and backed away from the window, gripping her backpack as though it were the only anchor she had. Breathe. It is just noise. People forget fast, she told herself, even though she did not believe it. Meanwhile, across the city, Adrian sat in the board conference room reviewing financial projections when his phone buzzed repeatedly. Nina glanced at him with urgent alarm before showing him her screen. A wall of notifications, headlines, videos, comments. His chest tightened as he read the story, twisting Lena into something fragile and cheap. "What did Cole do?" he muttered, though the answer was obvious. Nina spoke quickly. "This is a targeted release. Someone scrubbed metadata and worked with micro-influencers to push it viral. This is orchestrated." Adrian shut his laptop. The board members bickered around him about crisis containment, but he no longer heard them. All he heard was the pounding in his chest. Lena would be seeing this. Alone. Possibly scared. Possibly blaming herself. He left the room, ignoring the startled gasps from the board. "Adrian!" "Where are you going?" Evelyn demanded from the far end of the table. He turned his head slightly, his voice low and steely. "To fix something you helped create." Evelyn's eyes flashed in indignation, but he was already gone. Outside Hailtech, the rain began to fall again as if the sky sensed the tension. Adrian called Nina. "Get the car now and locate the source of the leak." "I already know," she said. "It was Cole." "Of course it was." Adrian replied, gripping the phone tighter. "But I need to get to Lena first." The ride to the apartment felt endless, though it was only 20 minutes. Traffic lights blurred through the wet windshield. Reporters huddled at corners. Adrian recognized two who had harassed him earlier that week. The city felt smaller suddenly, as if every street pulsed with the story he never wanted written. When he reached the building, he spotted cameras near the entrance. The same two reporters who had followed him earlier now surrounded the door, shouting questions about his alleged relationship. Adrian pushed through them, his jaw tense, but his voice still controlled. "Move aside," he ordered. They followed anyway, filming every step. "Have you been secretly dating her? Is she living here on your payroll? Did you meet her at a shelter? Are you exploiting her for sympathy?" Adrian ignored them, climbing the stairs two at a time. When he knocked on the apartment door, he said nothing, only standing still, trying to breathe evenly so he would not project fear onto her. Lena opened slowly, her eyes red, though she refused to cry further. "They found me," she whispered. She looked small, yet fiercely composed. Adrian stepped inside, making sure the reporters could not glimpse her. "I am sorry this happened. This was not your doing. This is on me." She shook her head, pacing the small room, hands trembling slightly, though she tried to hide it. "I did not ask for this. I did not want my face on the internet. People at the kitchen kept staring. People online think I am sleeping with you." Her voice broke on the last word. Adrian's chest tightened painfully. "You are not the problem, Lena. The lies are. But I cannot let you burn for a decision I made." He kept his hands at his sides, resisting the instinct to comfort her physically. Boundaries. Always. She sank onto the edge of the bed, gripping a pillow. "I should end the contract," she said quietly. "If I leave, you can fix this. They will stop hunting me." Adrian walked to the far wall to give her space. "Ending the contract will not stop them," he said gently. "They will invent another story, another mystery woman, another weakness, but it will stop hurting you," she replied, barely audible. For the first time, he did not know how to protect her without violating her independence, so he chose honesty. "I did not expect you to carry the weight of my world." "You should not have to." Lena wiped her cheek roughly, trying to force strength. "I will not be the reason your company gets destroyed." She stood abruptly, heading toward the door. "I am leaving tonight. Do not follow me." The words sliced through him more deeply than he expected, not because he wanted her to stay for the contract, but because he wanted her to stay as herself. "Lena, wait," he said. But she shook her head firmly. "If I stay, they will keep digging. They will destroy everything you built. I will not let them ruin you because I was in the wrong place at the wrong time." Adrian watched helplessly as she placed her backpack on her shoulder, the broken zipper glinting under the dim apartment light. He moved aside, letting her pass because forcing her to stay would betray everything he had promised. Yet as she opened the door, she paused for a fraction of a second. she whispered without turning back. I never wanted to be your scandal. Then she stepped into the hallway, vanishing into the echo of footsteps. Adrian remained still for several seconds before exhaling slowly, gripping the doorframe. He had survived federal hearings, hostile shareholders, and billion-dollar negotiations, but nothing had felt as devastating as Lena Brooks walking away because the world mistook her dignity for a weapon. Lena walked through the rain as if the storm might wash the world's attention off her skin. The headlines had already begun mutating online, twisting her into an accessory. A prop, a scandal designed to pierce Adrian's reputation. She crossed the street quickly. Hood pulled low, weaving between corners she knew better than any shelter map. She needed to disappear before reporters figured out which direction she had taken. She headed toward the waterfront where an independent coffee shop sat tucked between a thrift store and an old record shop. It was the only place she had felt welcome since losing her job years ago. The owner, Rhea, a woman in her 50s with a voice like warm fabric, recognized the signs of broken people and offered them quiet corners without questions. Lena slipped inside, now drenched and shaking her backpack heavy with everything she owned. The bell chimed softly. Rhea glanced up from the counter. It took her half a second to see something was wrong. Without asking, she handed Lena a towel and pointed to the tiny break room in the back. Dry off first, sweetheart. Then tell me if I should worry. Lena managed a faint smile. She disappeared into the back room, wiped her face, wrung out her hair, and changed into the extra shirt she kept in her backpack. It was too thin for the weather, but at least it was dry. When she returned, Rhea handed her a steaming cup of peppermint tea. You look like the world chased you and almost caught you. Lena's throat tightened. It did. Rhea raised a brow. Man, trouble, corporate trouble, media trouble. All three, Lena admitted with a shaky laugh that felt hollow. Rhea leaned her elbows on the counter. Tell me if I need to kick someone's teeth in. Lena smiled weakly again, but the warmth did not hold against the freezing mixture of fear and humiliation still clinging to her. Before she could explain further, the shop door opened. Cold air swept inside, and Adrian Hale stepped in. He did not bring bodyguards or umbrellas or the intimidating presence CEOs often carried like armor. He walked in, soaked to the bone, hair dripping clothes plastered to his skin from running in the rain. He looked like a man who had chased her through half the city. He looked nothing like a billionaire. Lena's breath caught. Rhea's eyes narrowed at him, instinctively protective of the woman standing behind her. Adrian stopped 3 steps inside the shop, keeping a respectful distance, his chest rising as he steadied his breath. I am sorry to intrude, he said to Rhea first. I only need a moment to speak with her. Rhea did not move. That depends on whether she wants to speak with you. Lena hesitated. Every part of her wanted to run again, but something in Adrian's expression held her in place, something raw and unshielded. So she nodded once. Rhea stepped aside but did not go far, lingering protectively at the register. Adrian did not approach further. He stayed exactly where he was despite being soaked and shivering his hands at his sides. You walked away, he said quietly. She clenched her jaw. I told you not to follow me. I know, he replied, and I respected that for about 10 minutes. Then I realized you were out here alone carrying the consequences of my life. I could not pretend that was acceptable. She folded her arms, though the gesture was more to hold herself together than to push him away. This is not your burden, she said. This is my survival, and they are turning it into entertainment. Adrian's voice stayed steady, but there was a tremor beneath it. Lena, I would rather lose every investor than have you believe your life is disposable collateral. She swallowed hard. The reporters, the cameras, the articles. I cannot breathe under all that. I know, Adrian said. You should not have to. Then why did you come? He asked gently. To protect me, to ask me to come back, to fix your image. She listed each possibility like an accusation. Adrian shook his head slowly, rainwater dripping from his hair. I came because you looked terrified when you left, and I could not leave you to fight a storm you did not create. That was the only truth in my mind when I ran into the rain. It was the closest he had come to vulnerability, and it disarmed her more than anger could have. She lowered her voice. "If you stay here with me, cameras will find you. They will turn this shop into a crime scene. They will drag Rhea into it." "I am trying to protect you," he said. "And I am trying to protect everyone around me," she replied. Adrian looked around the shop as if memorizing the space, then spoke carefully. "I am not here to drag you back. I am not here to convince you. I am only here so you know you are not going through this alone." Rhea approached slowly, handing him a towel. "Dry off before you catch pneumonia." Adrian accepted it with a quiet nod. "Thank you." She studied him for a long moment and muttered, "He looks at you like you are Gravity Kid." Then she returned to the counter. Lena sat at a corner table. Adrian did not sit. He stayed standing near the entrance where he would not invade her space but also would not block the door if she chose to leave. She finally asked, "Why are you doing this without touching me, without demanding anything?" Adrian met her gaze with steady calm. "Because I know what it feels like to be used and cornered by power, and because you deserve someone who stands beside you, not over you." A silence stretched between them, fragile and warm. She whispered, "You should go before anyone recognizes you." "I will," he said, "but only after I know where you are staying tonight." She hesitated. "I will find some place." Adrian shook his head. "I am not asking you to return to the apartment. I just need to know you are safe. Your choice. Your call." He waited, without blinking, without stepping closer, without naming any alternative that involved him. Lena drew a slow breath. Rhea spoke from behind the counter. "She can stay in the upstairs storage room tonight. I keep it warm. No one else has a key." Lena looked at Adrian. He nodded, as if the decision was hers to own. She turned away, quickly wiping a tear she had not realized escaped. Rhea's voice softened. "You are safe here, sweetheart." Adrian exhaled a breath so quiet only he heard it. Then he stepped backward toward the door, still not touching her, still not urging her. Just present, just waiting. When he finally stepped outside into the rain, Lena felt something in her chest shift. She whispered into her palms. "He did not touch me. He did not try to save me. He just stayed." Outside the window, Adrian stood for several seconds in the downpour, letting the rain hide what he could not say. The next morning dawned with fog rolling low across Seattle, muffling the edges of the skyline, as if the city itself wanted to hide from what was coming. Adrian arrived at Hailtech early, a rare quiet settling over the building before employees flooded the hallways. He had barely slept. Every thought returned to Lena, the peppermint tea cooling between her hands, the way she tried not to tremble, the way she whispered, "You should go before anyone recognizes you." Nina entered his office with 3 tablets in her arms and a look that confirmed his fear. "It got worse overnight," she said. "The articles spread to mainstream networks. Hashtags are trending. And Cole has pushed an edited video clip to a private channel with several investors." Adrian felt the floor shift slightly beneath him. "What video?" Nina tapped the screen. The footage showed Adrian guiding Lena into his car the night of the storm, but the angle was manipulated. The lighting altered her face, blurred in a way that made her look intentionally secretive. The clip ended with a fabricated subtitle implying a hidden relationship and corporate impropriety. Adrian clenched the desk edge. "They are painting her as a scandal to dismantle me. Cole is escalating faster than expected," Nina said. "He is preparing to demand your temporary removal as CEO during the next board session." Adrian straightened. "What time?" 30 minutes? He nodded once. "Bring all data on the leak metadata patterns account transfers, anything connecting this to Cole." Nina hesitated. "Adrian, if the board believes this narrative, they might force a public breakup or something even worse." Adrian's jaw tightened. "I will not use her as a shield or a sacrifice. We fight on truth, not on destroying her image further." Nina breathed a quiet sigh. "Then we go in prepared." The boardroom felt colder than usual when Adrian entered. The long, polished table gleamed under the artificial lights, and the windows framed the fog-draped skyline like a warning. Evelyn sat at the head of the table. her posture rigid, her expression unreadable. Cole Maddox occupied the seat nearest the digital projector, as if already positioning himself as the new center of gravity. "Adrian, we appreciate your prompt attendance," Cole said with false politeness. His tone dripped with the satisfaction of someone who believed he had engineered a flawless trap. Adrian took his seat silently. Evelyn folded her hands. "We have a crisis. Your personal choices have created instability in the market. Investors are calling. Government partners are questioning your judgment. Gossip tabloids are setting the narrative." Cole clicked a button and the edited clip played on the screen. Lena entering Adrian's car. Adrian placing his hand lightly behind her as she slipped on wet pavement. A cropped zoom, implying something intimate that had never happened. When the clip finished, Cole leaned back smugly. Optics matter. Whether or not the relationship is appropriate is irrelevant. Perception is reality. Adrian remained calm, though a pulse throbbed sharply in his temple. That clip is doctored, and the story attached to it is false. Evelyn narrowed her gaze. "Can you prove it is doctored?" "Yes," Adrian answered. "And I will, but proving it publicly will drag her through more scrutiny she does not deserve." A ripple of murmurs moved around the table. Cole leaned forward. "The contract you signed with this woman places the company at risk. If the public discovers you compensated someone in need during a sensitive period, it will look exploitative even if it is not." Adrian spoke evenly. "The contract is fully compliant and supervised by Watkins. Boundaries are stated clearly. There was no exploitation and no romantic arrangement." Cole smirked and tapped the projector again, switching to another slide. News articles referencing Lena as a homeless girlfriend. A trending hashtag calling her a distraction. A network pundit mocking Adrian's leadership. "These are the consequences," he continued smugly. "The market responds to stability, not charity romances." Evelyn finally spoke. "Adrian, I need you to understand the magnitude of this situation. Our largest government contract renewal is next month. Any hint of scandal could jeopardize the entire cybersecurity deal. We cannot have uncertainty." Adrian leaned forward, his voice steady but firm. "What you call uncertainty is a woman being torn apart by narratives she did not create. We are discussing her as if she were a liability instead of a human being who has done nothing wrong." Cole cut in quickly, which was exactly his goal. "Then remove the variable. Publicly end the contract. Announce a mutual separation. Demonstrate that your focus is on Hail Tech." The board murmured in agreement until Adrian lifted a hand. Silence fell. "I will not make her the casualty of your ambitions, Cole." The room froze. Cole's smile tightened. "My ambitions." Adrian met his stare head-on. "You leaked the story. You fed the tabloids. You edited that clip. And you are doing all this because you want control of this company." The accusation hung in the air like a spark near dry tinder. Evelyn's eyes widened minutely and several board members exchanged uneasy glances. Cole chuckled lightly, feigned shock dripping off him. "Extraordinary claim, Adrian. Do you have evidence?" Adrian glanced at Nina. She slid a folder onto the table. "Network logs, financial transfers to influencer accounts, metadata correlating the leak to Cole's personal devices." The board erupted into hushed arguments. Cole's expression cracked for the first time. He leaned forward, voice low and vicious. "Even if this is true, you have already lost. The public sees you as compromised. You parade a woman from the streets into your inner circle. You let emotion infect leadership. And worst of all, the government thinks you are unstable. Whether you prove me guilty or not, your image is already broken." Adrian inhaled slowly. Then Lena herself became the breaking point of their war. He stood. "I do not care about my image. I care about the harm being done to someone who chose honesty in a world addicted to spectacle." Cole scoffed. "Then let her go. Save yourself." Adrian paused. He did not shout. He did not plead. Instead, he said quietly, "If Lena leaves, it will be because she asked, not because we sacrificed her to protect shareholders." The room went still. Evelyn exhaled sharply, rubbing her temples. "Adrian, you are placing personal integrity above corporate stability." "Yes," he answered, without hesitation. The board members looked at one another, uncertain, torn between loyalty, fear, and self-preservation. Cole leaned back, sensing he still controlled the battlefield. "Then, this is simple. Put her in a press conference. Let her speak. Let her admit there is nothing between you. Let the public see her distance herself from you, and if she refuses, then we vote on removing you as CEO." Adrian felt the trap seal around him tight and vicious. Either he exposed Lena again to cameras, or he risked losing the company entirely. For one terrifying moment, he had no immediate path forward. Nina's phone vibrated. She glanced at it, then whispered urgently, "It is Lena." Adrian's heart slammed once against his ribs. She was calling during a board meeting, a rare, desperate sign. He stepped outside the room, leaving the board in a buzz of tension, and answered. Her voice trembled through the speaker. "I heard the news, Adrian. They are saying the company might fall apart because of me. I cannot let you lose everything." "Lena, do not move," he said instantly. "I am coming to get you." "No," she said. "I am taking the ferry out of the city. I am ending the contract." The line went silent for a heartbeat that felt endless. Adrian closed his eyes, fighting the sharp ache in his chest. She was choosing to disappear not out of fear, but out of protection. The one thing he admired most about her was the thing that hurt most now. She would walk away to save him, even if it shattered her, and the ferry horn echoed across Elliott Bay, low and mournful as if the water itself understood what Adrian had just lost. He stood on the pier seconds too late, rain soaking his hair and coat, watching the retreating vessel carry Lena away from the city, away from the cameras, away from him. She had chosen the one direction he could not follow without violating every boundary he promised to respect. He whispered her name under his breath, not to summon her back, but to steady himself long enough to breathe. Within hours, Seattle swallowed the moment. Articles continued to churn. Commentators speculated about his leadership. Investors panicked. Cole positioned himself as the calm alternative. And through it all, Adrian felt Lena's absence like a fracture that kept widening. The first night he barely slept. He tried to review reports, but every line blurred because he could only picture her at the ferry terminal, backpack slung over one shoulder, chin lifted in fragile determination. Around dawn, he found himself sitting on the floor of his penthouse for the first time in years, back against the window city lights fading into morning, wondering whether she was warm, whether she had eaten, whether she had found a place that could hold her safely without turning her into a headline. The second day hit harder. He went to work mechanically but felt like a ghost in his own building. Employees whispered when he passed. Evelyn tried to speak with him, but he walked straight to his office without responding. He shut the door and stared at his reflection in the glass. For the first time, he saw what Lena must have seen: a man who lived in a tower high enough to be untouchable, but lonely enough to be starving. Nina brought him coffee and left quietly, her eyes soft with worry. "You cannot keep going like this," she said finally. He did not answer. Nina stepped closer. "Adrian, she left to protect you, not to erase herself. If you let this spiral, Cole wins both battles." Adrian rubbed his forehead. "I cannot focus on quarterly projections when I do not know if she even found a place to sleep." Nina's voice gentled. "Then let me look for her, confidentially. She deserves someone keeping an eye out. But you cannot chase her yourself. It would violate everything she asked of you." Adrian nodded painfully. He returned to work, but the walls felt too tight, the boardroom too loud, the office too empty. That evening he found himself wandering to the emergency apartment where she had stayed, the door still unlocked because she had forgotten to return the key. He stepped inside. The room smelled faintly of peppermint and old blankets. Her borrowed coat hung on the chair, forgotten in her rush to leave. Adrian touched the sleeve with the same care one would give something fragile. It still held her warmth somehow. He pressed the coat to his chest, then cursed himself silently for letting emotion control him. But he did not let go, not for a long time. By the third day, his exhaustion settled into a quiet ache. He went to his office early again, ignoring messages from the board and investors. He sat at his desk, staring at a blank screen until sunrise. When Nina arrived, she hesitated at the door before placing a folder in front of him. "I found her," his breath caught. "Where?" Nina sat across from him, her tone softened by gravity. Bainbridge Island. She found work at a dockside cafe. Small place under new management. She is safe. Adrian let the words sink into him like oxygen. She is safe, but something in her tone made him look up sharply. "What else?" Nina exhaled. "Reporters have found her too. Not many, but enough." They sniffed the ferry logs. A microblogger posted a blurry photo of her serving coffee. She looks shaken, but she is trying to keep her head low. Adrian stood abruptly. He paced the room twice trying to make sense of the collision of relief and dread pounding inside him. She left to protect me, and now the storm followed her. Nina held his gaze. She needs stability, but she will not call you. She will not ask for help. She thinks she ruins everything she touches. Adrian closed his eyes. "I did this." "No," she said firmly. "Cole did. The board did. The media did. Not her, not you. But we cannot leave her out there to fend for herself again." Adrian pressed his palms to the desk. "I cannot chase her. She made that clear. But I also cannot let her stand alone in this." Nina approached him quietly. "Then you do what she always does. Stand beside her without being seen." Adrian breathed deeply. If he could not touch her life directly, he would protect its perimeter. He spent the next hours reviewing every angle of Cole's sabotage, mapping out a strategy that would both expose him and shield Lena from further harm. He overturned every stone, traced every digital fingerprint, found every crack in Cole's narrative. At noon, he finally left the building with purpose, returning to the emergency apartment. He picked up her borrowed coat, folded it carefully, then placed it in a protective garment bag. It was not the coat that mattered. It was the promise inside it. Across the water on Bainbridge Island, Lena wiped down tables at the dockside cafe, trying to steady her breathing each time someone walked through the door. She wore a borrowed apron and a forced smile, but her eyes kept drifting to the window, scanning the street for cameras. She did not see Adrian. She did not know that he stood hidden across the road under an awning, watching only long enough to confirm she was safe, then disappearing before she could notice him. He kept his distance. He made no move to break her boundaries, but he came every day, at dawn or dusk, just to see the lights on inside the cafe, just to see she was still breathing in a world that tried to swallow her whole. He left no trace. Only presence. Only silence. On the night of the third day, he stood by the water, watching the ferry lights drift across the bay. The wind cut sharp through his coat, but he stayed until the sky darkened fully. He whispered into the cold air the words he had not been able to say to her. "I should have told you that you were never my liability. You were the only truth in the chaos." He turned back toward the city with a new clarity. If she would not return on her own, he would dismantle every threat around her until she no longer had to run. He would stand beside her even if she never knew. Night settled over Seattle like a bruise, deep purple fading to black, heavy with the cold weight of something about to break. Adrian stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of Hailtech's executive level, staring at the blurred reflection of a man he no longer recognized. 3 days of silence from Lena had carved lines into his face sharper than any boardroom war. He had spent the entire afternoon gathering evidence of Cole's sabotage. Nina printed logs, traced transactions, pulled digital fingerprints, and stacked everything into a single folder that felt heavier than stone. Round 8:30, she stepped into his office, whispered, "It is time." Adrian turned from the window. "The board wants an emergency evening session. They are rattled. Evelyn is furious at Cole, but she is also terrified of the contract collapse. And Cole has something else too," she said, her voice dropping. "Another video." Adrian felt the temperature drop inside him. "What video?" Nina swallowed. His team edited old security footage from the emergency apartment lobby. It looks like you entering the building late at night to see Lena. It implies intimacy. It is completely fabricated, but convincing. The cold inside Adrian hardened into something sharp. He picked up the folder. Enough. We end this tonight. When they entered the boardroom, Evelyn sat rigid at the head of the table, her fingers clasped so tightly her knuckles blanched white. Several board members whispered nervously, while Cole leaned back with the confidence of someone certain the crown was inches from his grasp. Adrian took his seat. Before anyone could speak, Cole tapped the projector. A blurred clip played across the screen. Adrian in the apartment lobby. A woman's silhouette edited in to appear like Lena. A falsely time-stamped entry log. Whispered commentary implying a secret affair. Evelyn slammed her hand on the table. Enough! This is getting obscene. Cole shrugged with a theatrical sigh. Perception is reality. The Government Contract Committee will not overlook impropriety, nor will the media, nor will shareholders. Adrian glanced around the room. All eyes flicked between him and the screen. He placed the folder on the table gently as if placing down a final chess piece. Perception is not reality. Evidence is. He opened the folder. Nina handed out copies, metadata logs, payment trails from Cole's personal accounts to influencer micro-contracts, proof of doctored images, rewritten timestamps, hired paparazzi. Even the anonymous blog that first posted the story was traced to a burner device connected to Cole's assistant. Gasps filled the room. Evelyn's eyes shot to Cole with dawning horror. "Is this true?" Cole's smirk faltered. He attempted composure. "These are circumstantial. Anyone could have spoofed those logs." Nina stepped forward. "Except these logs carry your personal authentication stamp. And the payments came from your offshore reserve fund." The room erupted. Cole's mask cracked fully now, revealing a vicious desperation beneath. "You think he is the victim here?" he snapped, pointing at Adrian. "He has lost control of Hailtech. He has lost credibility. He has let a homeless barista dismantle the stability of everything we built." The room froze at the venom in his voice. Adrian's jaw locked. "Do not speak about her like that." Cole barked a laugh. "She is a liability, Adrian. A woman with nothing to lose. You threw your legacy away for someone who cannot even afford a night indoors." Adrian stood slowly. Then the room stilled in fear. Not of anger, but of the calm settling over him like steel. "She is the only person in this entire narrative who has done nothing wrong. She asked for nothing. She took nothing. She protected this company more than anyone sitting here." Silence. Heavy, unbreathing. Evelyn spoke quietly. "Where is she now?" Adrian answered without hesitation, "Hiding from the storm you all helped create. Not because she is guilty, but because she refuses to harm anyone." Cole stepped forward, voice rising. "You want to die on this hill. You want to lose Hailtech over a woman who walked away." Adrian met his eyes. "I would rather lose Hailtech than become the kind of man who sacrifices someone innocent to save himself." Gasps again. But before the board could respond, Nina's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her face drained of color. Adrian's stomach clenched. "What?" Nina hesitated, then whispered, "Lena is in danger." He moved so fast his chair toppled behind him. "Where?" Nina breathed. "She is on Bainbridge Island." Reporters cornered her near the dockside cafe. Someone tried to grab her. She almost fell into the water. Adrian's heart punched against his ribs. He was already halfway to the elevator before Evelyn shouted after him, "Adrian, where are you going?" He did not turn. To her. Cole shouted, "You walk out that door, you forfeit this vote." Adrian answered without stopping. Then, "Vote." The elevator doors closed with a metallic thud. Nina ran after him, slipping inside just in time. "I will drive," she said, breathless. "No," he replied. "We take the private pier, call security, and get Evelyn the rest of the evidence. Tonight, Cole falls." They sprinted through the underground garage toward a restricted door leading to the corporate dock. Adrian's thoughts raced faster than the wind slamming through the corridor. Lena at the dock. Reporters pushing her, cameras flashing, her fear of falling, her eyes wide and defensive. Alone again because she thought disappearing would protect him. Rage and guilt churned in his chest. When they reached the private boat, Adrian took the controls himself, ignoring the captain's startled look. The boat sliced through the dark water under a sky heavy with threat. Lights from Bainbridge Island blinked faintly ahead. Adrian gripped the wheel hard enough to whiten his knuckles, his voice low and resolute. No more running. Not her, not me. As the boat neared the docks, Nina spotted flashing lights from phones. She pointed. There. Adrian anchored recklessly and leapt onto the pier, sprinting toward the cluster of reporters encircling a narrow walkway. Then he saw her. Lena pressed against the railing, hands gripping the cold metal as a reporter shoved a camera too close. Another blocked her exit. Someone tugged at her arm, trying to get her attention. She stumbled backward, her heel slipping on wet wood dangerously close to the edge. Adrian's voice tore from him before he even reached her. Lena! She turned, startled eyes wide and shining in the harsh phone lights. For a moment she looked like she could not believe he was real. Then her foot slipped again. She gasped. Adrian reached her in 3 long strides, his hand catching the railing beside hers, not touching her skin but shielding her body with his presence, absorbing the chaos with his own. Enough, he thundered at the reporters. Move back now. Cameras lowered. The crowd parted under the force of his voice. But Lena trembled, clutching the rail, breathing too fast, unable to step away from the edge. Adrian stayed close without touching. Look at me, he said softly. You are safe. I am here. Slowly her breath steadied, those tears streaked down her face. He lifted his hand, hovering it an inch from her shoulder, waiting for permission. She nodded, barely. Only then did he gently guide her away from the edge. As soon as she reached stable ground, she whispered, Why are you here? Adrian met her eyes with the raw truth he could not contain anymore. Because everything unraveled when you left. And because I cannot let the world tear you apart to punish me. Her eyes wavered with disbelief and something deeper, something beginning to thaw. The night air on Bainbridge Island felt colder than it should have, the kind of cold that seeped through skin and into the places where fear had recently lived. After the reporters scattered under security's intervention and Nina finished giving statements to the local officers, Lena stood beneath the dim dock light, hugging her arms tightly, shivering more from the weight of everything than from the breeze. Adrian stayed a few steps away, letting her breathe, letting her choose the distance. He did not reach for her. He did not try to lead her anywhere. He simply waited, hands at his sides, chest rising and falling with the same slow rhythm he used to calm himself during federal hearings. When Lena finally found her voice, it was thin but steady. You should not have come. They will twist this into something worse. Adrian exhaled quietly. Let them twist. I do not care. She shook her head, tears still drying at the corners of her eyes. I care. You should not lose everything because of me. Adrian stepped half a pace closer, still respecting her space, yet unable to hide the strain in his voice. Lena, I am losing everything because of him, not you. She swallowed, staring at the dark water. I left to protect you, and the storm followed me anyway. He closed his eyes for a second, absorbing the truth in her words, the way she always carried blame that was never hers. I never asked you to protect me. You did not have to, she whispered. I saw your world drowning, and I knew I should not be in it. Adrian felt something break in him. Not shatter, but split, revealing a raw place beneath. He could not undo the past days. He could not erase the headlines. But he could offer one thing. He had never offered anyone before. Choice. Let me take you somewhere warm, he said. Just to talk, just to breathe. You can leave after. You can scream at me, you can walk away again, but please do not stand here alone, shaking in the dark. Lena hesitated longer than any silence he had ever endured. Then, slowly, she nodded. Ria's upstairs room at the cafe was warm enough, but she did not want to bring him there. She did not want the cameras to follow her safe place. Instead, she led him through the quiet streets toward a small shelter she had passed earlier that day, an old church converted into a temporary refuge. The lights glowed faintly in the windows, a soft golden warmth that contrasted with the night. When they reached the entrance, she stopped at the bottom of the steps. "You can wait outside," she murmured. "I will be fine." Adrian shook his head gently. "I will wait, but I am not leaving. Not until I know you have a door that locks safely behind you." She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it when she saw something in his eyes, something she had not recognized before. Vulnerability. Not the performative kind, but the real, quiet kind of a man who had gone 3 days without sleep because he feared what the world might do to her. She climbed the steps, entered, and spoke briefly with the staff inside. They recognized her from earlier and offered her a room for the night. After confirming she had a bed and warm blankets, Lena returned to the doorway. She expected Adrian to be pacing or scanning the street for danger, but he stood still, hands in his pockets, face lifted slightly toward the sky as if letting the night air cool the turmoil inside him. She called softly. "Adrian." He turned instantly. She stepped out onto the top step, hands gripping the wooden railing. "I have a place to sleep. Thank you. For everything. You can go back to Seattle now." He did not move. The wind ruffled the hem of his coat, but he remained rooted in that exact spot. "I cannot leave yet. Not until we talk." She tensed. "Talking will not fix anything. It will fix one thing," he replied. "You thinking you have to vanish every time someone else makes you a target?" She looked down at her shoes. "I just did what I have always done. I disappear before anyone gets hurt." He stepped closer to the foot of the stairs, still not climbing them. "And I always survived by staying silent because silence kept me safe. But your silence is different, Lena. It is armor. And I do not want you to wear it because of me." Her breath caught at the sincerity in his voice. He spoke again, slower this time. "There is something you asked me the night we met. Something I never answered." Her heart stuttered. She remembered the car, the storm, her own fragile whisper. "Do we have to sleep together if I accept your help?" It had haunted her more than the tabloids because she still did not know why he had remained silent. Adrian lifted his eyes, meeting hers with a quiet, steady intensity. "I did not answer because I did not want you to think my help came with a price. Because your dignity deserved more than a quick reassurance in a dark car. Because I feared that answering too quickly would sound like a line instead of a truth. The truth is, I would never ask that of you. Not then, not now, not ever." Lena gripped the railing harder, breath trembling. "Why did you not say that?" Because he exhaled. "I wanted you to feel safe, not owned. And I needed time to understand whether I wanted you in my world because of convenience or because of something more difficult to name." The admission struck her like a held breath finally released. She blinked slowly, overwhelmed. "And now," she whispered. "Now," Adrian said, taking one final small step forward until he stood directly at the bottom of the staircase. "I am knocking on a door I should have knocked on from the beginning." She frowned, confused, until he spoke again. "Can I come in? Not the shelter. Your life, your story, not as your contract partner, not as your CEO, but as the man who has spent 3 days realizing that losing you hurt more than losing Hailtech ever could." Her knees weakened slightly. Adrian's voice softened further, almost fragile. "But only if you want that. Only if it is your decision. Only if letting me in will not break you." Time stretched thin and delicate between them. She could hear the hum of streetlights, the distant roll of the ferry horn, the soft warmth of the shelter behind her. Finally, Lena stepped down one stair, then another, until she stood directly across from him, separated by a breath and an unspoken history. Her voice trembled when she spoke. "You did not knock on the apartment door the night I left." Adrian inhaled sharply. "I did not want to cross a boundary you had not set, and tonight," she whispered, "you did knock." "Yes," he said quietly, "because I realized the only boundary left was the one I set around my own fear." She looked away for a moment, then back into his eyes. "Did I give you permission to come here?" He nodded. "When you walked onto that ferry, you said, 'Do not follow me.' You never said, 'Do not find me.'" A small, almost broken laugh escaped her. For the first time in days, the sound did not carry pain. She lifted one trembling hand. Adrian's breath hitched, but he did not reach for it. He waited. She brushed her fingertips lightly against his sleeve, the gentlest contact, barely a whisper of touch. It was permission without surrender. He lowered his head, eyes closing briefly in relief. She whispered, "I am not ready for promises. I am not ready for labels. I am still scared." Adrian opened his eyes. "I am not asking for anything except the chance to stand beside you. Not ahead, not behind, beside." Lena nodded slowly. Then her voice dropped into the quiet night. "Come inside." And for the first time since she left Seattle, she did not feel like she was walking toward danger. She felt like she was opening the right door. The shelter hallway smelled faintly of detergent and old pine wood, a scent that felt strangely grounding after the chaos of the past week. When Lena led Adrian inside, the warm yellow light from a single wall lamp softened the sharp lines of his face, revealing exhaustion he had been carrying in silence. She guided him to a small communal sitting room near the back of the shelter, where a couch faced a window overlooking the dim street outside. She sat on the far end of the couch, pulling her knees up and hugging them gently. Adrian remained standing for a moment, unsure if the room belonged to him, unsure if anything belonged to him anymore, except responsibility and regret. When she finally glanced up and whispered, "You can sit," he obeyed with the same gentleness he used when speaking to frightened employees during crisis briefings. The silence stretched between them, not tense, but delicate. Lena could hear the breathing of the few other shelter guests in nearby rooms and the faint hum of traffic outside. She stole a glance at Adrian, whose eyes were lowered, his hands clasped and then resting between his knees, his posture somehow both protective and exposed. She took a slow breath, then spoke softly. "What will happen to the company?" Adrian let out a small, weary exhale. "Cole will face the board tonight. Evelyn has the evidence. They will initiate an internal investigation and remove him from his position." He paused. "Hale Tech will survive." But his voice softened almost imperceptibly. "Survival does not feel like victory right now." Lena stared at him, unsure how to reconcile the powerful CEO she had witnessed in boardrooms with the man now sitting quietly in a shelter chair that creaked beneath his weight. "Why did you come? Why risk everything?" Adrian lifted his eyes and she felt the weight of his truth before he even spoke. "Because every moment after you left felt like I was watching my own life from outside a window. Because the noise did not stop. Because you were alone in it while people used your silence to build their narrative. And because I could not breathe, knowing you were carrying pain that belonged to me." She bit the inside of her cheek to contain the emotion threatening to spill over. Adrian continued, his voice steady but bare. "When you walked onto that ferry, I realized something. I wanted you in my life before I understood why, but I could not name it. I could not admit it, not to myself, not when I was trying to keep you safe by stepping back." He paused, rubbing his palms slowly together, a nervous habit she had never seen in him. "I thought distance would protect you, but distance only protected my fear." Lena lowered her knees and let her feet rest on the floor, facing him openly for the first time since the storm began. "Fear of what?" Adrian breathed quietly. "Of wanting something real in a world where everything around me is performance. Of wanting someone who does not need anything from me except honesty. Of choosing someone who could walk away at any moment and leave me holding the emptiness I have spent years avoiding." His voice cracked on the last word so subtly she almost missed it. Lena felt her chest tighten. She spoke carefully. "I did walk away, and I came back," he answered without hesitation. "Not because I wanted to drag you into this, but because you deserved someone who did not give up when things got hard." She swallowed her throat, aching from how long she had held everything inside. "I was scared," she admitted. "I still am. I have lived half my life trying not to need anyone. People want things when they see someone who has nothing, and I did not want you to fall apart because the world misunderstood why I was near you." Adrian nodded. "People misunderstand what makes you strong. They think survival is a weakness, but survival is the loudest proof of strength I have ever seen." She blinked, struggling to absorb the sincerity. He continued gently, "And transparency is what makes you dangerous to people like Cole. You do not hide anything. You do not twist anything. They cannot control someone who speaks without agenda." Lena shook her head, a tear slipping down her cheek. Then softly she whispered, "I do not know how to be enough for your world." Adrian leaned forward just slightly enough to show the intention without crossing any boundary. "Lena, you are not meant to fit into my world. My world has to make space for you, not the other way around." Her breath caught painfully. The room seemed to still as if the entire shelter listened. She looked down at her hands. "The contract is going to end soon, Adrian. The terms were 3 months." Adrian let silence settle before answering. "The contract ends. But what happens between us does not need to be bound by paper, only by choice." She lifted her gaze slowly. "Choice. Yes," he murmured. "Always choice." A long silence stretched soft and strangely peaceful. Then Lena spoke in a trembling voice. "I cannot be your distraction again. I cannot be your scandal again. If you stay, you have to stand beside me without expecting me to follow you into your world." His reply came instantly. "I do not want you behind me, and I do not need you in front, just next to me." The simplicity of it shattered whatever was still holding back her tears. She wiped her cheek, but another tear slipped down. Adrian's shoulders tensed instinctively, but he did not touch her. Not until she lifted her hand palm upward, offering silent permission. He moved closer slow enough to give her an exit at any moment. Then he gently took her hand in his. Their fingers intertwined awkwardly at first, then perfectly, as if they had been searching for this exact shape of closeness for days. It was not romantic in the cinematic sense. It was deeper. It was two people who had spent their entire lives believing they had to survive alone, finally letting someone share a piece of the weight. Lena whispered almost inaudibly, "I do not want to disappear again." Adrian closed his eyes as though her words were a blessing he had not dared to hope for. "Then stay," he whispered back. "Not because you owe me, not because I saved you, but because tonight is the first night we are choosing each other without contracts, without pressure, without fear." She exhaled shakily. "And if things fall apart again, then we rebuild again, together." A soft laugh escaped her, broken but real. She leaned her forehead gently against his shoulder only after making sure he would accept it, and his quiet intake of breath told her he did. Outside the shelter, the night remained cold and heavy. But inside that small room, something shifted. Something gentle, something brave. For the first time since the storm began, they were not two people from different worlds negotiating survival. They were two humans, choosing the space between them. Adrian did not kiss her. Lena did not ask him to. They simply sat there hand in hand, leaning into each other's warmth, letting the silence speak what they were not ready to say out loud. It was more honest than any vow. It was the night they chose each other. The first morning after choosing each other woke slowly, as if the world sensed it needed to be gentle with them. Pale sunlight filtered through the shelter's thin curtains, casting soft stripes across the room where Lena had finally fallen asleep without fear, and where Adrian, who stayed awake on a nearby chair the whole night, kept quiet watch until dawn. He did not touch her. He did not wake her. He simply sat with a blanket draped over his shoulders, listening to her breathing steady into something peaceful, as if her lungs were relearning the rhythm of safety. When she stirred, blinking groggily, her eyes immediately found him. He offered a small smile, the kind that asked for nothing in return. "You stayed," she whispered, her voice still tangled with sleep. Adrian nodded. "I told you I would not leave unless you asked." She sat up, brushing her hair back self-consciously. "You did not sleep." He shrugged. "Sleep is overrated." She gave him a look that said she knew that was a lie, but she let it pass. After a quiet breakfast provided by the shelter, they stepped outside into the crisp morning air. Fairy horns echoed across the bay while gulls circled lazily overhead. Lena tugged her borrowed coat tighter around her, but her steps felt lighter than they had in weeks. Adrian walked beside her, not leading, not guiding, simply matching her pace. "Where are you headed?" she asked. He glanced down at her. "Wherever you're going." She huffed a quiet laugh. "I am going to work at the Dockside Cafe." He nodded. "Then I am going there too." "You do not have to," she murmured. "I know. That is why I am." Lena shook her head, unable to stop the warmth rising in her chest. The cafe was quieter than usual when they arrived. Rhea looked up from behind the counter and raised a brow. "Well, look at that. The CEO survived the sea air." Adrian smiled politely. "Barely." Rhea snorted. "Sit before you fall." Lena clocked in and tied her apron, preparing for the morning rush. Adrian picked a corner table facing the window where he could see both her and the street. He ordered nothing at first, simply watching her work with a quiet admiration that made her cheeks warm whenever she caught him looking. After a while, she brought him a cup of black coffee, which she had learned he preferred over anything sweet. He wrapped his hands around the mug, letting the heat seep into his cold fingers. "Thank you," he said softly. She shrugged, but her lips curved. Just coffee. But the way he looked at her made it feel far from ordinary. When the rush began, Adrian moved to help without being asked, carrying trays, wiping tables, holding the door for customers. He blended in awkwardly at first, but his sincerity disarmed everyone, including Rhea, who pretended she was unimpressed while secretly watching him with approval. Hours passed in a steady rhythm. At one point, the power flickered and the lights dimmed. Lena stiffened instinctively, remembering the blackout at her old shelter, the panic, the helplessness. Adrian noticed instantly. He did not touch her. He simply stepped closer, placing himself in her peripheral vision, grounding her without a word. The lights steadied. Lena breathed again. That small, unspoken moment carved deeper into her heart than any dramatic gesture ever could. In the afternoon, after the cafe closed early for inventory, Rhea approached them, wiping her hands on her apron. "There's a space for rent next door," she said to Lena. "It is tiny, cheap, needs work, but it might suit you better than that shelter room." Lena blinked, stunned by the generosity. "I do not know if I can afford anything yet." Rhea shrugged. "We will figure something out, and you have a steady job now." She glanced pointedly at Adrian. "And apparently a man who refuses to leave your shadow." Adrian lifted a brow. "I do not think I shadow her." Rhea barked a laugh. "Son, you are the definition of a shadow with emotional investment." Lena nearly choked on air as Adrian flushed slightly for the first time since she had known him. After Rhea went back inside, Adrian turned to Lena. "If you want the apartment, I will cover the deposit." She shook her head quickly. "No. I want to earn it. I want to build something from the ground up." He nodded with respect. "Then we will make this place yours on your terms. Together." They visited the small apartment next door. The walls were scuffed, the carpet old, but the afternoon light poured in beautifully through the windows. Lena walked the small living room, slowly imagining shelves, plants, maybe a small coffee table. It was nothing. And it was everything. She sat on the floor, cross-legged in the empty space. Adrian lowered himself onto the opposite wall, giving her distance but sharing the silence. "Do you like it?" he asked. Lena nodded. "It feels like a place I could belong to, not just pass through." Adrian watched her quietly. "You deserve a place that feels like home." She met his eyes, and for the first time there was no fear in the connection. Just an understanding built on everything they had survived. The real world did not pause for their quiet moments, though. Adrian's phone buzzed with messages from Evelyn, from investors, from legal counsel, updating him on the unfolding investigation. He silenced the phone. Lena frowned. "You can take the call. It might be important." Adrian shook his head. "Right now, this is more important." She looked away shyly, her heart thudding louder than she wanted it to. Later that evening, they stood outside the cafe watching the last ferry cross the water. She wrapped her arms around herself. What happens now? Adrian looked at her with a gentleness that steadied the air between them. Now you build your life. And if you want me in it, I stay. If you need space, I give it. If you fall, I stand beside you. She breathed in slowly, letting the words settle like something warm, finally allowed to stay. "And what about you?" she asked. "What do you need?" He considered this for a long moment, then answered quietly, "Someone who reminds me that silence is not strength, that I do not have to carry the whole world alone." Her expression softened. She reached out and took his hand again, the gesture far more certain this time. He closed his fingers around hers with care. They stood like that until the last sliver of sun dipped into the horizon. It was simple, quiet, unremarkable to anyone passing by. But for them, it was everything they had fought through darkness to find. A life slowly built not by grand declarations but by small shared moments. A life where presence mattered more than words. A life ready for a future that no longer scared either of them. Autumn arrived in Seattle like a quiet apology, the trees shifting from tired green to warm amber shades, as if the world itself wanted to soften the edges of everything Lena and Adrian had endured. 2 months had passed since the night he knocked on the shelter door, 2 months since they began choosing each other deliberately carefully without rushing, without breaking the fragile truth they had built. The small apartment above the dockside cafe had slowly transformed under Lena's hands. A second-hand sofa refurbished with fabric she dyed herself, shelves lined with worn books, a tiny round table where she experimented with drink recipes that reminded her of the life she thought she had lost. Adrian helped only when asked, and even then with a gentleness that surprised everyone except Lena, who had learned the quiet shape of his heart. Their evenings became a ritual. After closing the cafe, Lena would brew 2 cups of coffee, one sweetened with honey for her and dark for him. They would sit on the balcony of her apartment facing the flickering harbor lights, sometimes reading, sometimes simply watching the ferries glide across the water. Adrian often sat with his long legs stretched out, leaning back against the railing, while Lena tucked her knees close to her chest, wrapped in a blanket. Her head sometimes drifted close to his shoulder, never touching, but hovering in a space carved out only for them. Occasionally he would tell her about board meetings and legal battles, about Evelyn slowly mending her relationship with him, about Nina's determination to rebuild the ethical foundation of Hail Tech. Lena would share stories from the cafe customers whose names she had memorized by heart, the man who always left extra change for someone who needed it more, the elderly woman who visited daily just to feel less alone. Life steadied into something tender enough to hold. But neither of them dared name what this was. A relationship, a beginning, a love that grew without declarations. It was simply their life, and it was enough. Until one night. It was a Friday evening, the kind when autumn wind carried a crisp edge that made street lamps glow warmer. Lena closed the cafe late after helping Rhea sort newly arrived boxes. When she stepped outside, she found Adrian already waiting, leaning against a parked car, reading something on his phone. Her heart lifted the same quiet flutter that always came when she saw him. "You did not have to wait," she teased. He pocketed his phone. "I know. But I wanted to." She blushed beneath the golden light. They walked together toward her apartment, the familiar sounds of the waterfront rising around them. Halfway up the stairs, Lena paused, her breath catching for a reason she could not explain. Adrian stopped beside her, his gaze steady. "Are you all right?" he murmured. She nodded slowly, but something warm and stubborn pressed behind her ribs, a feeling both frightening and freeing. She unlocked her door and stepped inside the tiny apartment, turning on the lamp near the sofa. Adrian remained near the doorway, waiting the way he always did until she set the pace. She placed her bag down and turned to him, her fingers trembling slightly. He noticed instantly. "Lena." His voice softened with concern. She swallowed her fear and whispered the words she had not dared speak until now. "I am not afraid anymore." Adrian went still, completely still, as if the entire world had exhaled around him. Her voice remained soft but steady. The night you asked if you had crossed my boundaries by coming to the shelter door. That was the moment I began trusting you, and everything since then, every quiet moment, every time you stayed without touching, proved something to me. He did not move closer, did not reach for her even now. He simply looked at her with a kind of reverence that made her knees weaken. I want you to stay. Tonight, she said breathlessly. His chest rose slowly. Lena, you do not owe me anything. This is not about owing, she whispered. This is about choosing. I choose you. Her words trembled but did not break. Adrian stepped forward, only one step enough to close a sliver of space, but not enough to rush her. May I hold your hand? He asked. She nodded, tears warming her eyes. He reached out gently, barely brushing his fingers against her palm before letting her guide his hand into hers. His touch was warm, steady grounding. They stood in the soft lamplight holding hands, saying nothing, letting the silence speak the truth they had avoided naming. He whispered, You make me want to be better. She smiled through her tears. You already are. They moved to the small bedroom where the window overlooked the harbor. The bed was narrow, the blankets soft from years of use. Adrian hesitated at the threshold. Lena squeezed his hand. Stay. Not because you feel responsible. Not because the world is watching. Stay because tonight feels like something we earned. He searched her face carefully. And do you want me beside you? Her nod came with a fragile courage. Yes. He exhaled as if releasing a weight he had carried for years. They lay down together, fully clothed, facing each other in the dim light. No urgency, no fear, no expectation. Just two people learning the shape of peace. Adrian did not touch her at first, waiting for her to bridge the final distance. Lena moved closer, resting her forehead gently against his. His breath caught not in desire but in awe. Her fingers curled lightly around his wrist, anchoring herself. He whispered her name like a promise. Lena, she whispered back. Adrian. They fell asleep that way, sharing breath, sharing warmth, sharing the quiet truth that intimacy did not require taking anything, only offering presence. In the early morning hours, long before sunrise, when the world was silent, Lena woke to find Adrian still beside her, his hand lightly over hers without realizing. She smiled, not afraid, not alone, chosen, and choosing. That was their one night. Not the night of passion the world expected, but the night two guarded hearts finally allowed themselves to rest in the safety they had built together. The night their story truly began. Thank you for staying until the very end of this story. If you are reading these final words, it means you felt something at some point, maybe in the quiet moments, maybe in the heartbreak, maybe in the gentle courage of two people who learned that love does not always explode like fireworks. Sometimes it arrives softly like a warm light in a place that used to be dark. Stories like this one are written for people who understand that strength does not always look like power, and that healing often comes from presence, not perfection. If Lena and Adrian's journey touched you in any way, even in a small, unexpected moment, I would love to hear from you. Your voice is what keeps this channel alive. Your comments help shape the next stories, and your reactions tell me what kind of characters you want to follow next. Comment below and tell me where you are listening from. I love seeing our little community growing across states, across countries, across time zones. Whether you are in Seattle, New York, Houston, Toronto, London, Manila, Sydney, or somewhere quiet with your headphones on, I am grateful you are here with us. Tell me which moment in this story stayed with you. Was it the first night in the Seattle rain when she whispered her question? Was it the moment Adrian refused to cross her boundaries even though the world expected him to? Was it the blackout in the cafe when he stood beside her without touching because presence was safer than contact? Or was it the final night in the small apartment when she whispered, I am not afraid anymore, and allowed her heart to rest for the first time in years? Maybe you saw a little of yourself in Lena fighting quietly to keep your dignity in a world that pushes you down. Maybe you saw a little of yourself in Adrian trying to unlearn the silence you built around your heart. Or maybe you simply love slow-burn romance stories where the greatest confessions are whispered in the dark, not shouted in the light. If you want more billionaire romance stories, more quiet healing arcs, more stories about dignity, boundaries, and emotional undulation, let me know. This channel grows because of your requests, your ideas, your energy. What should I write next? A Cinderella-style modern romance, a single dad story, a billionaire with a painful past, a runaway bride who meets someone unexpected, a rancher with a soft heart and a hard life. Tell me. I read every comment, even if I cannot reply to all of them. If this story made you feel something, please tap the like button. It helps the algorithm show this story to more people who need a moment of escape today. And if you want to follow more stories like this, subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next premiere. We publish regularly long-form emotional narratives tailored for listeners who do not want quick drama but deep storytelling. Before you go, I want to ask one last question, a tradition on this channel. If you could choose a moment in your life where someone finally stayed beside you when you needed it most, what moment would that be? Or what moment do you hope will come one day? Share your answer in the comments if you feel comfortable. You never know who you might inspire or comfort with your words. Thank you again for listening, for feeling, for being here. This story belongs to you now. And until the next one, I hope you find a quiet moment tonight that makes you feel safe the way Lena and Adrian finally did.